Good afternoon. Welcome along to this pre-match press conference on the eve of Milan-Napoli. We'll start with Milan TV. Napoli have been very consistent. They look very solid on the eve of their trip to San Siro. In recent matches, they've been able to gain a lot of confidence. Are they the main strengths of Napoli at this moment in time that we're up against tomorrow night? Yes, Napoli are a very strong side, and that's reflected in the league table. They've got a top-class coach, and they're on good form. They're winning matches because they're top of the table. And Napoli come to San Siro full of motivation to take on our team. But we're also very up for this match against a side that obviously are very strong indeed. Napoli have been worthy winners in their recent victories, but we're also very motivated for this fixture. Sky. Good afternoon, Gaffer, and best of luck tomorrow night. I'd like to ask you, how have the last few days been for you, for the squad at Milanello? You didn't know whether or not you'd play the game away at Bologna. Do you think the situation could have been managed differently in terms of your training schedule so you could have had more consistency on the training ground? What have you made of this? I'm not being controversial at all. Just technically, how did you manage things? It has been quite hard to manage things. Even on the eve of the game on Friday, ahead of the match on Saturday we didn't play, it was very tough to manage because when we trained, we didn't actually know at that stage whether or not we would play. And if we weren't playing, then we would have trained differently. So it was a very difficult couple of days, especially because we wanted to play the game. I think we were very heavily penalized by the fact that we didn't play that game. As I said, we really wanted to play against Bologna. And physically or technically, tactically, how are you? You're missing Tijani Reinders and Teo Hernandez through suspension, and you're also without Gabbia through injury. Could you give us an update in terms of who could be fit again in the coming weeks? And have you changed your take on Francesco Camarda, because he came on and looked very good the other night, and maybe occasionally these performances help coaches to figure things out? That's one reason why we wanted to play, because we now have two important players who are banned for the Napoli player. Whether it's good or bad, our players get booked. It's not always the case for everyone else, but we have these two players that are suspended. The team have trained well, and I've got faith in every single one of the players. I believe in the guys that will replace Teo and TG tomorrow night, just like everyone else. As for Camarda, nothing's changed. He did very well off the bench in the Champions League. He's a good lad who always works very well. And he simply confirmed what I think about Camarda, namely that he has a bright future in the game. Gazzetta dello Sport. Hi, Coach. A couple of things. First, in recent days on the training ground, what have you made of Rafael Leao's performances, and have you already decided whether or not he'll start tomorrow night? Second, when you spoke on the eve of the game against Club Brugge in the Champions League, you gave us the starting 11. You won the game. I don't know whether you're superstitious and you want to press ahead with this particular policy. Thank you. Maybe I should, but I don't want to. I won't give you any names from the starting 11 tomorrow night. I understand why you're so curious about Rafael Leao. He's trained very well, as he always does. It's not an issue. There is no Leao gate, in inverted commas. We're sure that he will soon be back to what we expect of him and what he expects of himself. As for whether he'll start tomorrow, I don't want to necessarily be drawn on that. Corriere della Sera. I'll ask you a very direct question. Are Napoli favourites to win the Scudetto? Are they favourites? I think it's always very difficult to name the favourites. Are they the best team in Serie A? They're currently top of the table, so they're the best side in the league. I think Napoli are one of the teams that can win the Scudetto. Rai. Good afternoon. I'd like to come back to Rafael Leao. There is no Leao gate, but what is it that's not working? Why is Rafael Leao having such a tough time of things at the moment? Because the coach doesn't pick him. Because if the coach picked him, there wouldn't be any issue at all. No, look, it's a normal situation. These things happen in football. They play, sometimes they don't play. As I said, when I make my team selection, I always consider a number of different factors. He didn't play, he might play tomorrow. I think this is completely natural. Mediaset. Hi, Coach. Hi. You've just said that Napoli are one of the teams that can win the Scudetto, one of the two teams. No, I didn't say two. I said one of the teams. No, one of the teams. No, that's my question. Are Milan still in the conversation about winning the Scudetto after the 4-4 draw between Inter and Juventus? Napoli are loving it. Napoli enjoyed this result for the Scudetto. Talk about Napoli, Inter and Juventus. We're talking less about Milan. Are Milan still in the title race? I think so. I think so. Do the fans believe? Why should they believe? Why should the fans believe? Because we're a good side. We're improving. And we believe that we can be one of the teams that can compete for the title. Good afternoon. I'd like to ask you, the fact that Bologna-Milan will be replayed 4 months from now in February, do you think this is going to have a negative impact on the league season as a whole? And could Davide Calabria play as a left-back, given that Teo Hernandez is out suspended? Yes, he could play there. I don't want to say anything more about the Bologna game. We are entirely focused on tomorrow's match. Bologna's been and gone. We need to move on. Sport Italia. Hi, Gaffer. I'd like to take you back to the summer when the fans really wanted Antonio Conte to take charge of Milan. Does that give you added motivation tomorrow, the fact you're up against him as Napoli boss? No, my motivation is that I am the Milan head coach. End of story. Ever since you took charge of Milan, you said that the team are improving, and after the Udinese game you said, this is my team that's also able to dig deep. On the eve of the game against Napoli, what do you expect? What progress do you expect from your team in terms of focus, be it defensively, offensively, in general? What more do you expect from your side? In general, I expect a number of different things. When we analyze our recent matches, our focus is always on what we haven't done so well, what we have done well as well, and what we need to improve upon. It'll be a different match tomorrow night, in my opinion. I think it will be a very even game against a side that defend very well. But we have prepared the game in terms of what the match might look like. There are things that we have improved upon defensively, whereas there are other things that we still need to make progress on. But we've also improved significantly when it comes to our defensive shape. Offensively, I think we have made big strides in terms of possession. We're a bit better at that at the moment. Maybe tomorrow we need to play more football in the final third of the game because Napoli are a team that press very high and then they drop deep into a low block. That's something else that we also need to improve upon, our decision-making in the final third of the pitch, the way in which we need to actually come up against a very compact low block. That's typically how Napoli operate. There are always things that we can improve upon. But I think we have improved in a number of different areas. Tele Lombardia. Good afternoon, Coach. Having that asterisk, namely the fact that you have a game in hand that leaves you that many points further off, that creates a bit of doubt and uncertainty, is that something that penalises you? How do you manage that? I don't think it changes at all. It might penalise the club for the fan base or for those that are looking at the league table. It is a penalty, but it doesn't change anything in my mind. But I understand that for people who are looking at the league table, then of course it is a different kettle of fish. Tutto Sport. Good afternoon, Coach. I wanted to ask you two things. First, with a full squad to pick from without injured players, what is Christian Pulisic's best position? Is it a number 10? You said that you prefer it when he tends to operate through the middle. I don't want to talk about that. I do prefer it when Christian plays through the middle. I prefer him when he's operating more centrally. Did you watch Inter Juventus last night? Yes. What was your take on the game? Did you see it as a spectacular game of football or a game littered with mistakes? Both. A bit of both. Good afternoon, Coach. I wanted to come back to Rafael Leao because I wanted to ask you, when you took him off against Club Brugge, that was more a case of the fact that he didn't necessarily cover defensively when you conceded as opposed to what he did attacking. No, that was just a decision I made. I think that's what the game required at that moment in time. No, it wasn't by any means a ticking off. Aria. Last week, Antonio Conte said that those who have won, who win, know what is required in order to keep winning. Do you think the club needs to know, or the players need to know with the belief? I haven't really understood the question properly. Antonio Conte said last week, Conte, okay. Conte said that those who have won know what's required in order to win. Do you think the club needs to know what's required, or do you think the team needs to get into the mindset and have the belief in order to win? But Conte was talking about Napoli, no? No, he was talking about Juventus and Inter, because they were up against one another, and he said that those that are used to winning can continue to keep doing so. To be honest, I'm not really understood the question correctly. Let's move on, and we'll come back later. Sorry, I didn't understand what you're getting at. I'll try and rephrase it. Antonio Conte said in the previous press conference, when he was speaking about Inter and Juventus, that are teams and clubs that are used to winning trophies, he said that those who win know what's required to keep winning in terms of mindset, playing style, self-belief. I wanted to ask you whether Milan has this belief as a team, as a club, and whether you have the mindset in order to be able to go on and win the Scudetto. Yes. I've just said that we want to keep competing in the title race. If we have this strength, then I'm sure we can. Everything is important at this moment in time. Good afternoon. You've never looked for excuses, you've always taken responsibility on the chin, but tomorrow it's probably the hardest game you faced in terms of unavailability because there are so many players missing, and you always say that when the going gets tough, the squad responds. Is that what you need? The squad and the team needs to respond in order to beat Napoli tomorrow night as opposed to anything else? As I've always said, I believe in all of my players. If I'm honest, it's not a case of me saying that here publicly, this is how I am. You can't do anything with players that are unavailable for selection. We've got other players. I prefer to look at it as an opportunity for those who don't ordinarily play. They have the chance to play. That's the way I like to look at things. And as I said, I believe in all of my players. I've got faith in my entire squad. It's not just because one player isn't playing that I suddenly don't have the belief that I can go on and win the game. I think all of the players need to understand that when we are a team, doesn't matter what your name is, doesn't matter what the name is on the back of your shirt. Tomorrow night we really need to see a strong team ethic in order to play well against Napoli. Milan Press, good afternoon. A little earlier on you spoke about Davide Calabria possibly playing as a left-back. I'd like to come back to that. An alternative going forward, given the position he plays for his country, could that be Strahinja Pavlovic at left-back? As a full-back? Yes, as a full-back, yes, because in Serbia, for the national team, he plays as a left centre-back in three. Yeah, but they play with a back three. And occasionally they actually build up from the back with a slightly more open, wider centre-back. But at this moment in time, I don't think Pavlovic has the skill set to play as a full-back. Good afternoon, Coach. I'd like to come back to Napoli. What or who are you most fearful of when it comes to Napoli? And could this be a game that's decided on the wings, on the flanks? Yes, both teams have their biggest match winners out wide on the flanks. Napoli have two players on the left and the right who are the players that create the most opportunities for the team. And we also have some big players on the wings who can be decisive. If there are no other questions, who are they? I don't know. I'm not going to tell you. Last question, Carlo Pellegatti. Thank you. Two questions. Good afternoon. Listen. In 1987-88 season, Arrigo Sacchi's side played Napoli. Sacchi's team had already lost 2 and drawn 4 at that stage, but the game against Napoli was the match when we realised Ruud Gullit, etc., what a good side they were. Super Milan born today, Napoli destroyed. That was the headline in La Gazzetta dello Sport. Do you think this could be the game when we're talking about Milan's under Fonseca in a few years' time? We already spoke about this on the eve of the Inter game. I'm not looking at it that way. I think wins breed confidence. And the bigger the side you beat, the more confidence you gain from it. But I don't think the development of a team pertains to one single match. We could play a wonderful performance tomorrow night, but if after that we go back to dropping off, then it's pointless. What I like to see most is whether the team are growing and improving, whether we're getting better. I think that's what matters most. But of course, winning breeds confidence, especially against teams such as Napoli. I'd like now to ask the head coach, not the... Americans say that attacks bring money, whereas defences win championships. 4-4 last night. Laborda scored last night in a game involving Nice, a 4-0 game, but with a very high defensive line. So you're no longer coaching teams to defend. I see mistakes with a lot of back passes. A few years ago, I didn't see that. But you head coaches, given that defences win championships, Barcelona beating Bayern 4-1. I'm talking about top teams. What's happening with you head coaches? We could spend 2 hours here talking about this. No, you can summarize it for us. If we look at Serie A, you certainly can't say that coaches don't work defensively, because this is the championship. If there is a championship where teams work defensively, then it's Serie A. They're typically a bit more defensive-minded here in Italy, and I think coaches do work on how to defend. I'd love to work a bit more on how to defend, but I don't have time. When you're at teams that play every 3 games, you barely have any time to work on anything at all. You just simply work on your game plan for the specific match at hand. That's the way it is. I think there are trends. There are trends in football. Something else which I believe is important, namely, is to work with players as individuals. These days, teams work a lot on shape, defensive line and structure. But I think occasionally we don't work enough on the individual posture of a defender. In almost every team, most goals stem not necessarily from a problem in terms of shape, but a mistake when it comes to decision-making from one individual player. That's how goals come about. But if I'm perfectly honest, I think it's harder to defend these days because teams typically defend better than they did in the past. However, there is a trend, in my opinion, which is man against man all over the pitch. It's always been very clear here in Italy that there are a number of teams that play man v man all over the pitch. Not throughout the game, but there are times during matches where some other teams, big clubs as well, they occasionally play like that for spells of matches. I think that also gives you more opportunities at certain stages of the game. I can give you an example. Barcelona against Bayern Munich. Bayern, in the first phase, when they're high, they press man against man. When they're in a mid-lying block or a low block, they don't press man to man. But that's a very high-risk strategy. And what happened was Barcelona actually scored goals in moments such as those. The more risky it is in terms of pressing that way, the more rewarding it can be in terms of creating goal-scoring opportunities. But I think in general terms, teams defend better these days than they did in the past. It's harder to find space. If you look these days, it's not every single team that necessarily knows how to attack in the final third when teams are camping and sitting deep, because it's difficult to find space. Teams are set up well, they're organised, and it's difficult to actually seek out that space. Then there are matches where there are a number of goals, sure. But it's hard to find a very clear explanation for all of this. Personally, I think every team defends better than they necessarily did in the past. Thank you very much, everyone.